I'm Anna Urban, and this is the Wildly Different podcast. I'm going to talk about all the wildly different takes out there on ADHD, neurodivergence, spirituality, manifestation, the meaning of life, trauma, shame, joy, purpose, and of course, all the actionable, practical strategies from the super scientific to the super esoteric. Some episodes will leave you with more questions than answers, but that's exactly the point. Is ADHD a disorder or a gift? Are we here to hack our time or maybe even to reimagine what productivity looks like entirely? How do we get ourselves to do the things we say we're going to do, even when every cell in our body would rather do something else? Are we neurodivergent, or are we aliens from Atlantis sent here to evolve humanity? Are supplements a scam? What's the deal with ADHD meds, and why do we have so much drama about it? If any of these questions resonate with you, then you've come to the right place. Let's get untamed. Guys, I started to record this podcast and my light died, and then I had to finagle it. Listen, this podcast is sponsored by Olipop. No, it's not. Maybe one day. My brain right now is like, I need to record this podcast, but my body's like, no, I don't want to. And so for a solid 5-ish minutes, I sat with that resistance and I said, you know what? Let's go. Listen, you know what's going to be exciting today? We're going to be talking about, we're going to be using some really big words. We're going to be using some really big words. One of them is ontology. Ontology. Isn't that a fun word to say? Ontological. Okay? And it relates to one of my favorite spicy topics of all time, which is ADHD is not your real problem. It's really not. I know that really gets people's knickers up in a bunch. Not my Untamed members, though. No, they get it. But for a lot of people, really shoots them through the roof, okay? The real problem we're going to talk about today is what happens after ADHD shows up, all right? It's the shame spiral. It's the system hopping. It's the self-abandonment loop, okay? You keep saying, I just need a better system. But you don't even know what the system is for. I just want to make sure I'm in the frame. Am I good? Am I good, team? Production team? There's no one here. It's just me. Okay. You're already working your ass off. Literally doing the job of an entire production team. Okay, it's just me. Meetings, laundry, dishes, kids' meltdowns. You're doing it all, okay? And you still feel like you're failing, like you're not doing enough, like you're behind, always, right? Let's zoom out and let's see what's actually going on. Because, you know, I have a really good analogy for this. I shared it in one of our coaching calls the other day. Let's say that you have water stain on your wall. It's like painting over the water stain. What's going to happen? The water stain is just going to keep coming back, right? Like, there's a leak. And so let's actually go look at where the leak is coming from, right? But a lot of us are just painting over the water stain, and we're spending a lot of extra unnecessary energy painting when we could be calling a roofer, you know? Most of us are trying to solve an ADHD symptom with a solution that isn't really built for the issue or isn't really built for us, right? We're trying to be efficient. We're trying to be productive, consistent, but we're never taking inventory, right? How long do things actually take? What's draining you? What expectations are you carrying that you never even consented to, right? And it's also about sitting with the discomfort of taking inventory. Like, that in and of itself is a real challenge, right? But the big issue that I have here is that you're not broken, okay? I have an issue with you thinking that you're broken. You're actually fighting invisible math with shame as your compass, okay? Let me tell you a story, okay? Just imagine that you work a marketing job, okay? Like a big marketing company, okay? And your boss catches you in the hallway and is like, oh, by the way, can you do X, Y, and Z for this client? And they start like rattling off all these details. And then like halfway through what they're saying, your brain just kind of glitches and you zone out, right? You get distracted. You start thinking about like what you're going to eat. And so you miss half of what they said. And when you come back to, right, you're like, oh my God, I just got distracted. But you don't ask for clarification because you have this like ingrained belief that like, oh, being distracted is failing, and like, oh, they're gonna think that I wasn't paying attention, blah, blah, blah. So you go into overdrive and you decide like, I'll just figure it out. Okay, I'll figure it out later. You stay late at the office, you try to fill in the gaps. And so then the next day you show your boss your work and she's like, there's a bunch of stuff missing. I talked to you about this yesterday, right? Cue shame spiral. I'm so stupid. I'll never, get this right. I have ADHD. If only I didn't have ADHD, I wouldn't get so distracted. I just need to try harder, right? And instead of looking at what happened to you, what happened in that situation using the Untamed Freedom Formula, TM, right? We'll get to it. You avoid your boss, you overcompensate, you numb out, you use it as more evidence for that story of I'm such a mess, right? Okay, let me talk about the Untamed Freedom Formula. This is like my baby. I'm very proud of it, okay? After being diagnosed with ADHD at 19 and kind of like going about it the traditional way, right, of taking medication and feeling like a piece of garbage, I decided, I don't know, it just kind of dawned on me like maybe there's more to this story. I don't remember exactly how I was able to connect the dots. Maybe I'll think about this one day and make it a podcast. There's a lot of dots. It's a lot of dots, okay? It's not just like an ADHD thing. Like this doesn't come from ADHD experts or ADHD books. Like that's a piece of it, but the Untamed Freedom Formula draws on philosophy. It draws on neuroscience. It draws on psychology. It draws on spirituality. It draws on a lot of different ologies. And I find that, you can't treat ADHD in a vacuum because you are more complex than that, right? And so I through like a lot of tinkering, a lot of like soul searching and contemplation, I came up with this formula. It's like a 4-phase formula that I'm calling the Untamed Freedom Formula. Okay, how many times can I say formula? So phase one, and this isn't a linear formula. There's 4 phases, but you're always cycling through these phases, and you can go from phase 1 to phase 3, to phase 4, and then back to phase 1, and you'll see what I mean once I start talking about it. And also maybe my production team can put in like a visual here of the Untamed Freedom Formula, okay? But so the very first phase is about relearning. And there's a lot that goes on in this phase, and a lot of it does come from like ADHD expertise, right? What are executive functions? Like how does your brain actually operate? What are the things that serve your brain? Because even within ADHD, like there's so much nuance that like certain ADHD strategies might work for one person, but not for a different person. And so it's really about like learning how your ADHD brain operates. And I do a lot of educating on this inside of ADHD Untamed. But so it's figuring out what is ADHD actually? How do you simplify ADHD? And then it's like doing a self-inventory. What are my values? What do I care about? What lights me up, right? Because part of navigating ADHD is like finding that novelty, right? The interest. And so knowing what you actually give a F about is like a really big part of the equation. And a lot of people, you're not the only one. A lot of people actually don't know what matters to them, what their values are, right? Outside of just like employee or like parent, right? And so in phase 1, each phase has an emotion attached to it. In Untamed, it's really funny. Like there are an infinite number of emotions to choose from in the world, right? But in Untamed, we really just focus on 4. All you need are 4 emotions and you are golden. And so in phase 1, it's all about curiosity. It's all about asking questions. It's all about playing the scientist. A scientist is not invested in the outcome of their experiment. If they are, they're not a very good scientist, right? You should not be invested in how the experiment performs. You should just be collecting data, right? And so when something happens, do you feel judgment about what happened? Like if something happens that like you didn't really like, right? You dropped the ball on that thing that your boss asked of you. Do you jump to like shaming yourself, beating yourself up, self-abandonment, or do you get curious? Most people outside of Untamed we'll do the first one, okay? But once we get into Untamed, that's like the first thing that I sell you on is like getting curious, gathering data. Like one of our favorite mantras is data, not drama, right? And so we get curious about what actually happened. So let's go back to that example. Why exactly did you zone out, right? Besides just like I had ADHD, right? Or I have ADHD. What was going on in your body, right? Maybe if you dig a little deeper, maybe you'll realize, you know what? She caught me in the hallway when I was thinking about like something else. I wasn't planning on having a conversation with her. But even if you were like in a meeting, right? Maybe you zone out in a meeting. Why? Right? Maybe you were hungry. Maybe you were hungry, right? Can you check in with your body? Maybe you were tired and that exacerbates, how distractible you are. Maybe you just like had a rough morning, right? And maybe you didn't give yourself time to like decompress in the parking lot like you normally would have, or whatever. Like, what were some things physically that were going on? And then also asking yourself in that situation, what might have helped? What might have helped? In the hallway example, maybe if we didn't have such an attachment to like, oh, distraction equals bad, we could say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't catch what you just said. Could you repeat that? Right? But a lot of times when we have like negative like self-worth and negative drama about being distracted, we won't do things like that. We won't say like, oh, can you repeat yourself? Or, oh, I didn't catch that, or maybe this is like a cue for you to be like, oh yeah, do you mind if I write this down? Because otherwise I would forget, right? Everybody forgets. But when we have this negative relationship to distraction, we assume like, oh, we must be the problem, right? So through this phase of relearning who we are, what we value, what helps us, how our brain functions, we gain a lot of data, right? We get a lot of data and we redefine distraction, not just as a flaw, but just as a neutral thing, right? We ask ourselves, what am I making this mean about me? Okay. And then phase 2 is called reflect. So it's relearn, reflect, and reflect is all about acceptance, and it's about using relationships as mirrors. And you can have you are in relationship with everything. I am in relationship to this camera in front of me. I am in relationship to my dog, who is looking so cute. I am in relationship to my job and my clients and to, that notebook on my desk. Like, you are in relationship to people, places, and things. And so it's, again, bringing in curiosity, but meeting it with acceptance, right? So it's, what is my relationship to distraction? And can I accept that I get distracted? Can I accept that I get distracted more than most, right? Because if we do not accept it, I do not accept that I get distracted. I do not accept it. What do? We try to use more willpower, use more discipline, use more shame, use more self-punishment. And that doesn't work, right? It doesn't work. Whatever parts of ourselves we disown always end up becoming bigger and bigger and bigger shadows. And so in this acceptance place, you are looking at your relationships as mirrors. Maybe in the past, your boss has said some like not so nice things about you being distracted. And so you ask yourself, what is my relationship to my boss? And through the lens of distraction, and can I accept it? Can I accept that my boss doesn't like me? Because what happens if you don't accept it? You'll do things like people please, right? Or you'll overcompensate, or you will, curse your boss, right? Like all the time, or it's like, it ends up being, what's funny is it ends up being more of a distraction, right? So maybe your boss is actually really kind, right? But because you have this like fragmented relationship with you being distracted, it kind of like eats away at your relationship with your boss, right? So acceptance is all about accepting reality, accepting what is, because what you resist persists. So what is your relationship to the different parts and people and places and things in your life, right? when you, and this doesn't happen overnight, it's a process, right? Like you work on this a little bit. The whole point of the Untamed Freedom Formula is for radical ownership. Because when you take ownership, full ownership over who you are, then you are whole. That is the path to radical wholeness. It is the path to integrating all the parts of you. And if you want to bring spirituality into it, it's the path to the fourth dimension, right? It's the path to love. That is, whatever philosophy, whatever belief system you have, it's like wholeness is the whole point. Like that's what we all want, is to accept ourselves fully. And so we go through this process on every coaching call, in every masterclass, in every workshop. It's like it always comes back to this. What can you get curious about? What are you resisting, right? And that brings me to phase 3, which is called release. And the release phase is about self-compassion. So you hear the shame script, right? You always screw up. You're not cut out for this. And so you ask, whose voice is that? Right? And you accept that there is a voice that is very shamey. And through self-compassion, you say to yourself, distraction is a part of how my brain works, and it doesn't make me less valuable, right? You reclaim the distracted part, the messy part, the parts that's afraid, through self-compassion. And self-compassion can look like, taking care of yourself, like making sure that you are fed, making sure that you have white space in your day, making sure that you are saying kind things to yourself. You guys, you are so mean to yourselves. And listen, I am mean to myself too, at times. And I'm telling you that voice does start to change the more that you pay attention to it. You can actually adopt a kinder voice to yourself, and kindness, even in a situation where somebody doesn't like you, or you did mess up and you made a mistake. It's like, you're never going to become more whole through shame and self-abandonment. It's only through self-compassion. Yeah, owning yourself, owning your mistakes, right? Owning your weaknesses as well as your strengths, right? Through self-compassion. It's one of the most overlooked aspects of ADHD, right? So often we try to ignore it, suppress it, hide it, make up for it, when in reality, it's like, can we just accept it? Can we just accept it? And can we be kind to ourselves? Because that's actually a hell of a lot less distracting than making us more riled up, right? So phase 4 is called respond, and the emotion tied to that is willingness. And this is where all of my manifestation junkies get excited, because willingness is what will create the life of your dreams, create the life of your wildest dreams. If you can do the first 3 phases in any given situation, curiosity, acceptance, and self-compassion, then the willingness to take action follows naturally, baby. It follows naturally. And how do you create the life of your wildest dreams? How do you manifest, right? Money, relationships, health, whatever. It's through aligned action. It's by taking aligned action, right? And so in that example of, the boss and messing up, it's the willingness to ask for a follow-up email. It's the willingness to take notes. It's the willingness to repeat instructions back. It's the willingness to do these things, not from fear, but because it makes you feel supported. It's not from a place of having to overcompensate, but it's from a place of wholeness. It's from a place of wholeness. Distraction isn't this big secret anymore. And it doesn't mean that you have to go around telling people I have ADHD and I get really distracted, right? Sometimes we do that and it's not necessary, right? But it's not secret to you anymore, right? It's a part of your system, right? And you don't need to share that with people just so they so they tiptoe around you or whatever. A lot of people have a lot of weird reasons for disclosing or not disclosing, ADHD or autism or whatever. But it's you can share it if you want to, if it's from a place of wholeness, but you don't necessarily have to in order for people to be hey, take it easy on me, right? Because that's not what you want anyway, right? The whole point of the Untamed Freedom Formula is to bring you back to wholeness. That's what you came here as. You came here whole, right? So, okay, now I want to talk about that word ontology, okay? It's a really fun word, ontology. All right, so we're going to talk about philosophy for a second. So, what is ontology? Ontology is just a fancy philosophy word that means what is the nature of a thing? Like, what is something really at its core? Are there any philosophy majors listening to this? You know what I'm talking about, right? This is like the sort of conversation that you have like in college, like when you're high. You know what I mean? Like, not what it does or how it functions, but what is it actually? And this is kind of like my whole shtick is like, what is ADHD really? Right? Like, what is it really? So ontology asks, like, what kind of thing are you even talking about here? Right? And so with ADHD, when I look to the ontology of it, what I find it's like, it's not about fixing something, it's about understanding what it actually is. So let's say, here's another analogy. I'm the queen of analogies. Let's say that you're trying to teach a firework to flicker like a candle. Okay, you keep tweaking it, you keep like giving it more wax, you keep trying different lighters. But here's the thing, a firework is supposed to explode in your face, right? It's supposed to roar. It's not supposed to flicker. Like if you light a firework to, it's like set the mood in your house, like it's gonna be a mood, right? Like a candle glows, it's quiet, it warms. Right? A firework is a spectacle. Trying to make a firework explode less doesn't just blow up in your face. It's like a total misunderstanding of what it is. That is a ontological mistake. And so when we talk about ADHD, what I really think is going on is that we've made a giant, massive ontological error. Like we've decided that the right kind of brain is linear, efficient, focused, obedient to plans. And when a brain doesn't match that, we call it disordered, deficient, right? And so we blame every negative thing that happens in that person's life on ADHD. But what if that's just like trying to make a candle act like a firework? What if ADHD brains are meant to burn differently, right? That doesn't mean that it's broken, right? It's just that we're asking it to be something that it is never meant to be. So when we say something like somebody has executive dysfunction, we assume that there's a correct way of functioning and that there is, and that is external to your lived experience, right? That way of functioning is external to your lived experience. And if you don't match it, you're deficient. But what if your ADHD brain isn't broken? It's just oriented around a different metaphysical truth, right? So if you take the example of like discipline, I need more discipline assumes that we should all be able to force ourselves into doing things, right? But what if your brain isn't designed to respond to force? What if your brain is designed to respond to engagement, purpose, novelty, coherence, right? Alignment. Trying to discipline your ADHD brain is like trying to squeeze fire into a mason jar, right? It's misunderstanding the nature of the thing that you're working with. So rather than treat executive function like a moral muscle, right? We can define what executive functions are like, what executive functions do we excel at, right? What if ADHD isn't a disorder of executive function? What if it's a divergence of linearity? And I know I'm not the only one talking about this, right? Like we even use that term nowadays. It's neurodivergence, right? And I think that this is a beautiful place to be heading into, but we're really just scratching the surface. Like I even in these circles, we still talk about like, deficits in our executives, right? But what if we're not here to fit the mold? What if you're here to build a life that actually works for your brain, one that's built from clarity, curiosity, one that's built from wholeness, right? Because when we're talking about ADHD, we're not just talking about symptoms, we're talking about people, right? We're talking about theology, right? There's like a theology of ADHD, which is like the belief system is you're supposed to be linear, you're supposed to be focused, you're supposed to be productive, right? It's presented as truth. That's dogma, right? The theology of executive function, it worships executive function the way that some religions worship obedience, right? The goal of this life is consistency, control, compliance. Is it any wonder why we push back on that? Right? The good ones are the ones who stick to the plan. The struggle is proof of a deficit and not an invitation, right? It points to ADHD as some kind of like moral deviation, right? And this is why people say things like, I just need to get my shit together. I'm lazy. I have no discipline, right? If I just tried harder, that's internalized theology, right? You've been told that you are a broken worshiper at the altar of productivity. And so you keep trying to earn redemption through to-do lists, right? Ontology doesn't ask, are you doing it right? It asks, like, what are you actually made for? What are you actually made for? It's about design, right? It's not about dysfunction, right? Maybe the ADHD brain isn't just a machine, right? Maybe it's something more fluid. Total side note, but this is exactly why so many people misinterpret the Bible, is because we've been obsessed with theology for 2,000 years instead of ontology, worshiping Jesus instead of trying to live like Jesus. That's a story for another day. Guys, this has been really fun. This was a short but sweet little breakdown, and I really want to encourage you to apply the Untamed Freedom Formula in your own life. Think of a situation recently that didn't really go your way. And I want you to walk through that process of like getting curious about it. Just asking questions without any, and like genuinely asking, not like, why didn't I get to that? Because that's really a statement, that's not a question. But it's, why didn't I get to that? Why didn't I get to that? You know, and here's another example that somebody shared with me the other day that was like, you know, every time I snooze my alarm in the morning, my day is ruined. Like I start off on the wrong foot. Could you get curious about that? Is my day ruined? And you know, start with the acceptance. Okay, I accept that I snooze my alarm often. I accept it. Like rather than, like start from a place of acceptance rather than a place of like trying to change it, just accept what is. Accept what is. I woke up late today. Okay, let's start with acceptance. I woke up late today. You know, not ideal, not what I wanted, but it happened, right? We can't go back in the past and change it. And then what is my brain saying about that? What is it thinking about that? Oh, now my day is ruined. And this is when you can bring in curiosity. Is my day ruined? Is my day ruined? What would make this day not be ruined, even though I woke up late, right? And then it's self-compassion. You know what? You're trying your best. You are figuring this out. You are doing the best that you can, right? It's like saying kind things to ourselves. You are figuring out what it takes to wake up, you know, at a time that you want to wake up. It's like you're experimenting, right? It's shifting from shame to kindness. And then it's willingness, right? The last phase is respond. Okay, I've gotten curious. I've accepted. I'm compassionate. And now am I willing? Am I willing to make the most of this day, even though I woke up late? Because what's the alternative? What's the alternative? What do you normally do is you shame yourself and then you tell yourself the day is ruined and then you go about your day as if it is ruined and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, is that working for you? And if the answer is no, are you willing to try a different way? And if you would like to go deeper into the Untamed Freedom Formula, if you would like to do this alongside dozens and dozens of ambitious, neurodivergent humans who are making their mark in the world and getting wild, baby, getting untamed, check out the show notes, check out the link in, you know, wherever you're listening to this. It's, you know, it's, if you're on YouTube, it's down below somewhere. If you're on Apple or Spotify, it's in the show notes somewhere. All right. But I would love to bring you into the wild, wild world of becoming whole. All right. That's it for this week, guys. I'll see you next week. Bye.